Let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
It's not the Democratic Party that I knew or that I was a part of for many, many years. And this socialist trend that's going on is something that I couldn't stomach anymore, and it's why I left.
A race that matters. New York's 4-horse race heats up, and the stakes have never been higher from this city, from the country, for the Democratic Party, who has decided to do a political autopsy on their 24 election disaster without analyzing Kamala or Clueless Joe, which makes me think it's going to be worthless.
Number 2.
There are so many elected officials that have gone ahead and tried and called for the open doxing of agents, saying that ICE agents and officers and their families shouldn't have any rest, shouldn't have any peace. That's just totally unacceptable.
War against illegals in America. It's become clear the aliens have an ally, every Democrat in Washington, and it's making Trump's job harder, putting ICE agents' lives in danger. Who is the public siding with? We'll discuss.
Number 1.
So the Republicans in the House and Senate have to work together seamlessly as one team, and we have obviously a very strong commander-in-chief. It's a great team. We're getting a lot done for America, and we're just getting started.
That is the Speaker of the House talking about his team, and he's talking about the first 6 months. Grade Trump too. CBS poll has low polls. I see big wins from the Maha to Iran to the big beautiful law. I want you guys to weigh in, though, and so I do want John Heubusch to weigh in. John, welcome back.
Hey, great to be with you, Brian.
So, John, your thoughts about the first 6 months?
Fantastic. I mean, historically unprecedented, I think, Brian. I've worked for years and years all about the legacy of Ronald Reagan, and he was one remarkable president. But I have to tell you, President Trump is something else. It's just been fantastic to watch one victory after another. And I'd say the main thing that defines him, Brian, in my mind, is courage. That guy is the most courageous politician I think that we've had in America in many, many years.
I mean, he really changed the party. People were talking about, well, we need a third party in this country. What he did is he went in and changed the party within the party structure. And people couldn't believe it was happening. They would never accept it. Remember, Jeb Bush says he will not be the nominee. Barack Obama says he will never be a president. And they were both wrong.
You bet. Going back to Reagan for a second, people talk about him being a transformational president, and he really was. And I thought that was a really high bar, but I have to tell you, the first 6 months of this year, it's beyond a doubt that Donald Trump will go down in history as being a truly transformational president. And that is a mean feat, really.
So if you're going to do 6 months in any other period, judging his first 100 days, 6 months, you see the border shut down. We have never seen anything like it. And you lived it, but President Reagan said, I'm going to do immigration reform. And he had a pledge that they're going to seal the border. He gave amnesty. They never sealed the border. He says, I'll never be duped like that again. Trump sealed the border himself. When they said it was up, I didn't think it was possible. I think Tom Homan even surprised himself. I mean, between the military and the Coast Guard, they literally sealed the border. So now it gives you the opportunity, without trusting anybody, to do some type of immigration reform. Many elements of it aren't even controversial.
Yeah, totally agree. And pointing again, I'm sorry, but I keep going back to Reagan, but he, Ed Meese, the guys that surrounded the president at the time said, that's the biggest mistake we made in all 8 years. They should have never cut a deal like that. They thought they were going to get border security and get restrictions on employers for hiring illegals, but the Democrat Congress never came through, and they were had, and so I'm just so glad to see that President Trump's not fallen into that same trap, and I think it's provided some history for us to look back on to say what we got to be very, very careful about not doing again, and that is believing that the other side is going to come through with some sort of program to really restrict it. I don't believe that's not in their interest. I don't think they're ever going to want to come to the table to negotiate something that will be acceptable for this country. So I think President Trump should stay right on the track he's presently on.
So when you talk about the illegal immigrants, and now we see ICE out there with the border seal, we're going out to pick up the worst of the worst and anybody with them along the way. But there's this huge pushback to vilify the ICE agents. You say that is part of a strategy to to make sure that they get to stay and make us look like hard-hearted or the ICE agents look like terrorists.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Ron, I wrote a piece on Substack about 2 or 3 months prior to this election, knowing that when President Trump got elected, this was going to be the prime issue. And I was trying to put up warning flags about how difficult this was going to get, not only from a cost standpoint, but certainly from a PR
optics. Yeah,
and it was just going to be terrible. But I have to say, and this is a really tragic situation, Brian. But I wrote another piece recently, and what I think the Democrats are really seeking here by demonizing our federal agents trying to clean up this immigration mess is they're looking for their next George Floyd moment. I really believe if you watch these crowds of people and how violent they're getting, they are trying to force Trump and his administration and these brave officers into making a tragic mistake. And they're looking for someone that can lose their life on their side, who they can build monuments to turn around the political narrative. It's a really, really dangerous situation. And I have to say, I'm really proud of everyone in the border security world right now working under President Trump for holding their fire, for being as mature as just taking it. It's starting to frustrate Americans, I think, that they're not able to really put these violent protesters in their place, but they've been so responsible. And I hope they keep that up, because I don't think we should give the victory to the other side by making a mistake ourselves.
I mean, just listen, I don't know how dumb Karen Bass is or how she's playing dumb or who she's playing to, but listen to her describe ICE agents. Cut 47. Oh, cut 17.
Let me just explain, because you have people who are literally walking down the street, sitting at bus stops, are individual vendors selling fruit on the street. These masked men pull up in unmarked cars and jump out of the cars with rifles and detain people. So for the average citizen, it looks like it's a violent kidnapping. So you should never have that. They don't identify themselves. And furthermore, to your previous guess, how on earth do they know that they're a threat when they're just chasing random people through parking lots, at Home Depots, going to car washes and rounding up people? It's difficult to get your car washed in Los Angeles now, because most of the car washes, the employees won't come to work out of fear that a raid will take place.
So do you think ICE agents get up in the morning, they just chase Hispanics down the street?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's what they want to do for a living, and I tell you, I saw an interview, because I live out here in LA and I've been in the middle of all this. Saw an interview just the other day with Karen Bass, and the interviewer said, well, you got about 1 million illegal immigrants that live right there in Los Angeles. And, there's a problem here, isn't there, with it? And she said, oh, yeah. Can you imagine if LA all of a sudden lost 1 million illegals? Well, the place would shut down. So this is a culmination of many, many years of sanctuary activity. And now they're getting what they paid for. The city literally would shut down if ICE could do its job completely. And that is indicative of the kind of terrible leadership that Governor Newsom, that Karen Bass have been leading the state into for many years. And it's a tragic situation out here in California, Brian. It really is, because there's a mass exodus of people, and they've just had enough. And immigration is just one part of the terrible equation that's been affecting their lives.
But yet Gavin Newsom feels he's done such a great job, he should be the next president. He says it's the Mecca. He thinks he's doing a fantastic job, and better than California, a lot better choice than Texas. He says, I'll take that comparison any day. Yeah, well,
if you thought Joe Biden was a lousy president, just wait for Gavin Newsom, because he is not an executive. He is an actor. That's what he is.
I agree. I 100%
He's just an actor, and everything about him and his life and his administration is about performance art. That's all it is. He could, if the nation thought if he thought it took outlawing illegal immigration and cracking down on it, and that was the way for him to get elected. Well, guess what? That's what he would be for. He's just all about himself, and it's destroying the state in the process.
So, what you said, I agree with. In his 6 months, you could point to a myriad of things the president's already accomplished, including passing that massive legislation. No one's talking about the crypto bill that set up a criteria for cryptocurrency. It's going to be a revenue stream for this country. You talk about the international deals he's done and the energy. He's trying to revitalize energy in anticipation of the demands of AI. And from the DEI to taking on the colleges, it's amazing. But if you look at his overall approval rating, if you look at CBS, 42% approval rating. On immigration, he's dropped to 49. On deportation, his policy went from 56 to 47. If you're working with the Trump team, how much do you shape any future policy on how your perception is from a CBS poll? And I imagine others reflect the same thing.
I do what President Trump is good at, and that is ignore the polls. Just keep doing what's right for this nation and keep that heading. And, listen, when Ronald Reagan was president, at the end of his first 2 years, he had not so good approval ratings. And it's going to take a little while for all the things that Trump has done on the economic front to really kick in. It can't happen overnight. But we're going to see an explosion of economic activity in the United States like we probably have never seen before because of the work that Trump has done. But it's not going to happen in August. It's going to happen probably by next August in a really fundamental way. And I think his approval ratings will skyrocket in the between now and then, and it'll be a wonderful thing to see.
John, did you have a period, being that Trump is so different? Was there a period where you were saying to yourself, this guy's not presidential material, he's a Republican, but I can't get behind this? Was there in the beginning, because he's so different an approach maybe than Ronald Reagan and the George H.W. Bush and George W.?
Yeah. In fact, Brian, when I ran the Reagan Library, as you know, we have big presidential primary debates there. I got to meet President Trump in the 2016 run-up. And, his style was so dramatically different than Reagan. I mean, you couldn't find two personalities and how they handle politics more differently than those two. And I had to tell you, I was skeptical. I was, of course, in a million years, never Trumper. I'm for our side winning. But I did wonder, is he really going to be able to be a great executive? But man, I'll tell you, I just changed my mind within a few weeks of him being in office in 2017. I just really admire the guy's courage. And I'll have to also say, and this is not a criticism in any way, but oftentimes it felt to me when I was running the Reagan, that what Trump would do every morning is reach under his bed and pull out the Reagan playbook and take page after page from it, from the standpoint of policy. And if you look at their policies, they match really well. And I think Trump has just found a way to modernize the Reagan message in the modern day, and also to have a backbone of steel to keep pressing forward. And I just admire him so much for that.
Can you imagine if he didn't have that fake Russia investigation for 2 years that was costing his family, we will find out $400 million, and wiped out his staff, and, from Manafort in solitary confinement. Now we know it was a total hoax, just like the laptop. Can you imagine we didn't have that?
Oh, Brian, that's why I say courage, because I don't think any other personality in the United States could have, in that role as president, could have survived this. I mean, his skin is made of steel, and where does that come from? Because at the end of the day, I think what he's all about is doing what's right for America. That's it. That's all he's trying to do, and it's been the metal that has protected him, and I just hope it remains in place, because he's just doing terrific things for this country, and I can't wait to see more.
Yeah, don't worry about the polls early. I think it's a good reminder, real quick, with Reagan, when he first started doing his supply side things, then he loses his stockman, and then he's like, I'm not buying any of this, and people must have really been questioning whether this was going to work or not.
Yeah, in fact, Brian, I was working on Capitol Hill at the time, and there was when he was passing his tax relief and a number of these really critical supply side bills. It was new to the country, and the Democrats were very powerful back then. And the White House had to constantly remind House Republicans, stay the course, stay the course. That was the term, stay the course. And on the House side, in the Republicans in the minority, what was whispered around was, yeah, we'll stay the course, because they were all worried about losing their jobs. And guess what? 26 House Republicans did lose their jobs by after the first 2 years in that midterm election. It was a very tough go, but they stayed the course eventually, and that's how Reagan did so well.
And I think that these guys understand that too, and they're going to try to keep the majorities in both houses. Let's see if it happens. John, it's always great to talk to you. We'll keep reading all your stuff on Substack. John Heubusch, I appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Brian.
It's not the Democratic Party that I knew or that I was a part of for many, many years. The Democratic Party I grew up in was responsible. They were compassionate. They were fiscally responsible. They understood that they had to do their part but help those who needed help. But get up and do something for yourself. There's none of that right now that we can see of. And this socialist trend that's going on is something that I couldn't stomach anymore, and it's why I left. And if the National Democratic Party doesn't get back to more of a center or center left, there won't be a party that they're going to recognize at all.
I know, and that is exactly like I expected Joe Manchin to feel. And when he joined me on Sunday night on One Nation, that's what he said. Matt Continetti joins us now, Director of Domestic Policy at AEI, and he's also a columnist, a commentary, and founding editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Matt, your thoughts about the Democratic Party, who oddly is doing an autopsy on the 24 election, but pledged not to look at Biden or Harris?
Yeah. Hi, Brian. That's an incredible autopsy. It's like the criminal investigation unit decides, we're not going to look for the cause of the harm to the body when we do the medical examination. I think the Democratic Party is in the process of self-destruction. When you look at the fact that it is at record lows in popularity.
19%, right?
19%, decade lows. When you look at the fact that its fundraising and its polling in the congressional generic ballot is not where it needs to be ahead of the midterm election. And then when you look at the fact that it is clearly turning left at the very moment it should be moving toward the center and integrating the lessons of the 2024 campaign, you have a party, I think, that has a death wish, and no individual better encapsulates that than Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist that the New York Democratic Party has nominated to be the next mayor of New York.
And you got a mayor from Sudan, a mayoral candidate in Sudan, looks like he's got the nomination in Minneapolis with almost no experience, but he's an avowed socialist, Muslim socialist who I don't even think likes the country.
So we're going to take him over the incumbent, who, of course, got himself in a twist with the left during the George Floyd riots of 2020. And let's not forget, of course, the lawlessness that we see in these anti-ICE protests taking place throughout the country, and most notoriously in Los Angeles. And then these very disturbing reports as well that we hear from Democratic congressmen saying that when they go meet their constituents, the Democratic base is telling these elected representatives to become even more outraged and even potentially violent. This is a party that is not connecting with middle America, which does not want any of the gender nonsense, which does want a secure border, and which wants, above all, to have a full employment economy with rising incomes.
I just want people to hear, and I don't want people to get caught up listening. Why are we talking so much about New York? Because this guy is actually, in a recent betting poll, is the fourth leading candidate to get the nomination, as crazy as that sounds. And he's slightly behind, just barely behind Cory Booker. Listen to what Zoran Mamdani believes as early as 2020, cut 23.
I think that, frankly, what purpose do they serve? Right? I think we have to ask ourselves that, which is that, I think a lot of people who defend...
Will you just pause one second? He's saying what purpose? He was asked, should we have prisons? Keep going.
It makes them feel. They're not defending the reality of it and the practices that are part and parcel of it. Because, if you actually break it down and ask people how many people come out of the prison system better than they went into the prison system, right? How much harm is actually being prevented versus created? I think when you ask these kinds of questions, people don't always have clear answers.
Yes, we do. Your option to be a rehab. I want criminals in prison, but he's not for that. He said domestic disputes should be addressed by social workers, and it should be equivalent to a jaywalking ticket. Your thoughts?
He's also raised opposition to the principle of private property, one of the foundations of Western civilization. No, I think Mamdani does deserve a lot of attention, not because he will be the president of the United States one day, but because he's very closely connected to someone who might win the Democratic nomination for president in 2028, and that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When you look at where the energy is in the Democratic Party, it's not with the kind of the safe liberal establishment any longer. It is with these younger socialists who are anti-American, they're anti-Israel, they're anti-capitalist, and they want to uproot the very foundations of our society. This is not only bad for America and for Western civilization, Brian, it's bad for the Democratic Party, because when the Democratic Party is associated with this ideology, it loses at the polls.
I would think so. We'll have to see. Now, you wrote about Elon Musk and the third party. So, you remember Ross Perot in 92, and remember he got 20% of the vote, but no electoral votes. Remember he kept that party around for a while. John Anderson back in the 80s, I think, was around. But third party just doesn't seem to be able to get traction. Is this going to be different?
Well, I think it has the possibility to play the more traditional role of the third party. If Elon Musk does go ahead with the America Party, and he's been talking about it a lot, but we have yet to see anything on the ground in terms of organizing to get ballot access, for example. But if he does go through with it, third parties traditionally play two roles in American politics. The first is profit. You can see in third parties where one of the two major parties might go. And with the Reform Party, started by Ross Perot in 1995, 96, you saw kind of the roots of MAGA and the Trump phenomenon that would later become so dominant in the Republican Party. The other role that third parties play, Brian, is spoiler. And that's what really worries a lot of people, and worries the Trump administration too, because sometimes you run these third-party candidates, they're able to win enough of the vote to deny the major party that agrees more often than not with them. But I still kind of am looking to see whether Elon Musk is going to put some muscle on the bone of his proposed third party.
I do too, and I would say this. If Donald Trump in 2016 says, I'm going to run for president, but it's going to be the MAGA party, he wouldn't have won.
Right.
See, he went in and changed the Republican Party in his own way. Well, he didn't go in and start his own party because it wouldn't have worked. And then if you ever get in, you got absolutely nowhere to pass anything because nobody's on your side.
Yeah. And in fact, not only would Trump have lost had he run as an independent, but so would the Republican nominee, whoever that might have been. And so Trump was smart. He knew that if you want to have real change in American politics, you have to operate between one of our two major parties. And that's exactly what's happened over the past 10 years with Donald Trump and the Republicans.
So what is your take, before I play a little of Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, as Director of National Intelligence, she has acquired and going to release more information, about 100 pages of memos that shows, she says that Barack Obama was orchestrating basically the insurance that Donald Trump would not have a successful or any presidency, to have the whole Russian hoax. Before I play Tulsi Gabbard and what she said over the last 3 interviews, what are your thoughts about what we know now that we didn't know a week ago?
Well, I think we know some more of the timeline about these meetings, about the initial finding from the intelligence community and then the White House meeting with Obama that resulted in a separate finding, which laid the foundation for the Russia collusion hoax. And so if DNI Gabbard has more to release, I think we'll have a further documentary record. It might provide some public pressure to get Obama on the record, but I bet you he's going to fight that for as long as he can.
Yeah, cut 34.
President Obama and his team, he directed a manufactured piece of intelligence that detailed not if, but how Russia tried to influence the outcome of the United States election that President Trump won in November of 2016. This document was then used as the foundation for everything that came next. It was essentially a years-long coup that was launched against President Trump before he even had the opportunity to take his oath of office and be sworn in as President of the United States.
So that's the beginning. And I could go through this again. There's been so many books written on it. But it's like, Matt, we have two parallel lines. You and I will follow this and try to get to the bottom of this. And then you have the other side totally ignores this story. Jeffrey Epstein begins and ends every broadcast now.
Yeah.
So do you think this would be one time where the trains have to cross?
I think they're going to have to cross eventually. But, I think, Brian, what is really fascinating me is this DOJ investigation into Comey and John Brennan. So the former FBI director and the former CIA director, which is based on a CIA finding. So separate from Tulsi Gabbard, this is John Ratcliffe and the CIA finding that Comey and Brennan had something to do with the dirty intelligence that led to the Russia hoax. So that's where I would keep my eye on. And I think what DNI Gabbard is doing is supplying more evidence that something was rotten in that Obama White House during the transition in 2016. But I'll just say this. The media is so good at covering up stories. And let's not forget that even now, when you have some media spokespeople acknowledging Joe Biden's cognitive decline, it's still not being covered, and they're still protecting their reputations. So I'd expect them to try to do the same thing here with the Russia scandal.
And with the Biden thing, they're all taking the fifth, and it's going to be hard to get traction. See if Ron Klain is different. I've heard from a Democratic official that Ron Klain ran that White House. I go, what about after he left? He goes, he was still running the White House. So someone's going to tell the real story.
We know Biden wasn't. Yeah.
So you have Jake Tapper who comes out and writes this book and goes, I was so stunned to find out he wasn't running things. And he went out and took a lot of heat from both sides for doing it. But just go to show you that this is a score for money, in my view. You watch him yesterday go 6 months into the Trump administration. We're going to take a look at that. But let's begin with Jeffrey Epstein. They do the whole half hour on Jeffrey Epstein. Nobody cared about Jeffrey Epstein until they found out it could divide the MAGA world. Now it's an obsession on Jeffrey Epstein. Let me ask you, Matt, what do you think is the top 10 story that matters most to America? Is Jeffrey Epstein even in the top 10?
No, not at all. I'll tell you the number one, Brian, it's hamburger prices. And I know that the Trump administration is paying a lot of attention because even though we've made great gains in inflation overall and with egg prices and with gasoline prices, those hamburger prices are still pretty high. And so I'd expect the Agricultural Department and Secretary Rollins to come out this week with some policies addressing that. That's the number one story, not Epstein.
Absolutely. And the cost and so we'll see what's going to happen. Lastly, on Ukraine. The President of the United States is really fed up with Vladimir Putin. I love this, what they're doing on drones. Use their drone technology in exchange for bigger Patriots, maybe more offensive weapons. So in the big picture, the president has made a 180. And he says, Zelensky and I might have problems, but clearly Putin is the issue. And you got my support. And now he's got a fortified NATO, a motivated NATO, with two more quality countries, which Joe Biden deserves credit for. Evidently, he picked up the phone. Go ahead, give him his credit. Finland, Sweden, got him in. So now you have a fortified NATO, and you have a president that says, okay, I see who the bad guy is. Your thoughts about him evolving on this?
Well, I think it was always about the sequencing. First, you needed to make sure that the Trump administration and Zelensky of Ukraine were on the same page. And at first, I think Zelensky was a little bit wavering, but then he got on Trump's side, and the two have a very good relationship, it seems to me. Then you had to have NATO all on the same page. And that NATO summit in June was extremely important, not just for the 5% commitment, but also because Trump came out of that saying, look, NATO's trying to defend itself against Russia. He really understood. Now we have the turn. Now we have the foreign military sales, the NATO purchases of our weapons that will then be given to Ukraine. So we get money for these. It's not a foreign aid bill. We have the threat of the punishing tariffs at the end of the 50-day period. And we also have this sanctions bill in the Senate, which would be very tough with secondary sanctions on countries that still purchase Russian oil. The one other thing I'd look at, Brian, is the frozen assets. We have some frozen Russian assets.
5 billion.
Europe has a lot more. If they could use some of those to supply Ukraine with weapons, that would provide the pressure on Russia finally to come to the negotiating table.
Here's Lindsey Graham, cut 48.
He's not going to stop until somebody makes him stop. So Trump has been tough on Iran, who is incredibly dangerous, but they're in a weakened state. And Putin, your turn is coming. You know, Donald Trump is the Scotty Scheffler of American politics and foreign diplomacy, and he's about to put a whooping on your ass. What's going to happen here is that Trump is going to impose tariffs on people that buy Russian oil. China, India, and Brazil, those 3 countries buy about 80% of cheap Russian oil. That's what keeps Putin's war machine going. So President Trump's going to put a 100% tariff on all those countries, punishing them for helping Putin.
Your thoughts? Do you think it'll come to that?
Well, I think that there will be tariffs imposed. And just one other thing that's kind of been left out of this conversation. You know, the One Big Beautiful Bill, Brian, had a lot of money for defense. I think 150 billion plus that helps our Defense Department rearm and get back up to fighting strength. That's something we need, sure, to compete with China, but it will also send a message to the Kremlin to show that America is not leaving the world stage, despite what many people may think or may have heard.
Spread out those ship contracts, get the drones flowing, use R&D, and start moving up. And the recruiting is going strong. It's one of the president's unsung accomplishments. Matthew Continetti, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Creating this piece of manufactured intelligence that claims that Russia had helped Donald Trump get elected contradicted every other assessment that had been made previously. The effect of what President Obama and his senior national security team did was subvert the will of the American people, undermining our democratic republic, and enacting what would be essentially a years-long coup against President Trump.
That was Tulsi Gabbard, a series of interviews, Lawrence Jones, over the weekend, saying that they've uncovered documents showing that in September, everybody knew the Russians were not significantly influencing any election. They certainly weren't hacking machines, and they changed December 14th. They totally changed their status and said, let's start working on this Russian connection and linking it directly to Trump.
Brian, I think the key takeaway is these aren't her words. These are their words. All the intelligence agencies, and including the FBI as well, have contact, are doing daily meetings, and it says in the file, when they were actually labeling the meetings, that yes, Russia was trying to interfere with the election, but they just weren't good at it. They didn't know how to deal with each county running their own election, and so they almost pretty much dismissed it.
Took out Facebook ads.
Right. It's like, okay, you're planning disinformation on Facebook. Okay, a lot of foreign actors do that. Okay, we kind of dismiss it. But after the election, you see the intelligence agencies ratchet it up. And they're not putting those meetings on there publicly, telling us what they're discussing. And then that's when they plant this seed saying Russia is responsible for Donald Trump's victory.
So they just ignored it on the Sunday shows, except for Face the Nation, as one question to Congressman Jim Himes. Cut 41.
What you saw from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was not just and treason. Somebody's going to get hurt. Now, you pointed out that the Senate committee, then led by Marco Rubio, a Republican and now Secretary of State, found unanimously that Russia meddled in the election to try to assist Donald Trump. John Durham, special counsel appointed by Donald Trump, investigated this, found that the Senate report was correct.
So... Your thoughts?
Well, he's making two different points. Yes, we all agree that they tried to meddle. They weren't successful, number two. And number two, it had no impact on the election. So that is Tulsi's entire point, is no one's disagreeing that they tried. They just weren't good at it. And to suggest that the president colluded with them, he was not a willing participant in that.
Yeah, so... He calls her a liar. Basically, he says he's disingenuous. She says, you watch, there's not going to be any indictments from this. Well, it's not up to her to get the indictments. No. Now it's up to the FBI and Pam Bondi to go out and do that. Here's more. Cut 42.
Now, what Tulsi is doing, it's a little sleight of hand, but it's worth focusing on. She is saying that the Intelligence Committee early on said that the Russians could not use cyber tools to mess with the voting infrastructure, the machines that tally our votes. And that was true then, and it is true now. Though the Russians tried to break into a couple of states, election technical infrastructure, they didn't do it. But it is well known and well established that the Russians hacked into the DNC and undertook any number of other influence operations, including buying reams of Facebook ads to discredit Hillary Clinton. That is not in contention.
It's $2 million of Facebook ads, and it didn't do anything.
Yeah, but anybody can buy Facebook ads. Yeah. Anybody can say whatever they want.
The problem
on the public
there's probably
square.
Other people doing it.
The question is, and he knows this is why he's trying to split hairs, is did it have any impact? And he concedes to that point that they tried to mess with local elections, but they didn't have the tools to do so.
So then they go ahead, and Don Jr., who met with this Russian, and why was Michael Flynn in Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, taking a call from an ambassador to Russia? Why did Senator Sessions, who became Attorney General Sessions, why did he meet with the ambassador? And Sessions folded like a cheap suit and said, okay, you're right, I should put a special counsel in charge.
Noise. No one was ever charged with collusion with Russia. They got them on other things like lying to the feds and other things like that, tax charges and all that. But no one was ever charged because they didn't have the goods. They didn't have any real evidence to suggest there was willing participants in the collusion.
So here's what Chris Wecker said, the former assistant FBI director, Cut 38.
Here's the thing. They completely flipped counterintelligence on its head. They got information that the Trump campaign was being targeted and that Hillary Clinton and her campaign were trying to smear Trump with the Russia hoax, what turned out to be the Russia hoax. And what you would normally do in the field of counterintelligence would be to go to the American citizen, in this case, a presidential candidate, and give them a defensive briefing and say, look, you're being targeted. The Russians are trying to impact the election in some way. Instead, the FBI under Jim Comey and McCabe opened up an investigation on the Trump campaign itself. And I think what we're going to see, and what Tulsi Gabbard has pointed out, is that Barack Obama was the puppeteer here.
That was an interesting point by Swecker that I hadn't really thought about. Normally, whenever a foreign actor is targeting an American, there would be a briefing. You'll try to protect the foreign actor. You ask them, can the federal government put some security precautions? Kind of like the assassination threats on the president as well as Pompeo. The federal government steps in and say, how can we protect you? The same thing for a cyber attack or anything like that. The federal government didn't do that. They didn't try to protect the Trump campaign. They didn't give them a briefing. They didn't try to put different security measures in place. That's asinine that they didn't do that. That's a point that needs to be highlighted. And they knew this. They knew that they were trying to attack them. And instead of trying to protect them, they said they colluded with them.
Lastly, just when it comes to Harvard and the Trump administration today, Trump revoked authorization to enroll international students. He suspended $2.2 billion worth of grants and contracts,
Huge.
$60 million, threatened to remove accreditation. So now Harvard's suing to get all their money back. How do you think this goes? It's going to be a hearing today, and a judge is going to make a decision.
They're going to have to buckle. All the other universities are willing to negotiate. Now, we had heard, Brian, behind the scenes that Harvard was trying to negotiate. But now it seems like they don't want to negotiate. And it's interesting enough that their attorneys are they don't want a trial because they don't want all the stuff that the administration hasn't covered, the anti-Semitism on campus, to be shown in open court.
Right. It's going to be a judge's decision, but it's an Obama judge.
That's what they're advocating for.
But it's just, if you're a federal government, you have to pay, you have to give out grants and loans?
No way. This is going to go to the Supreme Court, and you're going to see the authority back to the executive.
Unbelievable. Lawrence Jones, thanks so much.
Thanks, bro.
It's now okay for you to go party with all your friends for the morning show now. I kept you an extra half hour.
I'm going to do jiu-jitsu.
It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue with such significant impact that it should concern every American because it has to do with the fabric and integrity of our democratic republic. that we had a situation here where in the months leading up to the 2016 election, the intelligence community assessed, and this is what the documents detail, the intelligence community assessed essentially Russia doesn't have the tools, the capability, or the intent to try to change the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. Donald Trump pulls off a historic victory against Hillary Clinton in November of 2016.
And she goes on, 34.
President Obama and his team, he directed a manufactured piece of intelligence that detailed not if, but how Russia tried to influence the outcome of the United States election.
So they came up with these, they're putting these memos together, they see a plan in place, and then we saw it. You weren't there yet, Congressman, but Dan Meuser's still with us. You weren't there yet, but then they start saying how he didn't really win the election combined with Vladimir Putin, and they investigated for 2 years.
Yeah.
But it looks as though they have the manifest here.
Yeah. It looks as though that Tulsi Gabbard, the new director of intelligence, found information that shows that the Obama administration, right from the top, including the CIA director, including Susan Rice, head of national security, that they all knew that there was not a strong effort from Russia trying to influence the election, and they propagated that theory anyway, sent that message, just didn't propagate a theory, created and paid for, by the way, Hillary Clinton paid for, it was like $10 million, a Steele dossier, which had all kinds of false information in it, stating all these things that the president supposedly did. But even worse, James Comey had the audacity to walk into the Oval Office and put what he knew was a phony dossier on the president's desk, saying, "This is the information the Russians have on you, and we think you're a target."
And John McCain thought it was real too. Here's what Jim Himes said when he heard about this. Congressman from Connecticut, cut 41.
Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was not just a lie, but a very dangerous lie, because when you start throwing around language like sedition and treason, somebody's going to get hurt. Now, you pointed out that the Senate committee, then led by Marco Rubio, a Republican and now Secretary of State, found unanimously that Russia meddled in the election to try to assist Donald Trump. John Durham, special counsel appointed by Donald Trump, investigated this, found that the Senate report was correct.
The only person to be asked about this on another channel was Congressman Himes. Your reaction to him basically saying that Tulsi Gabbard's a liar.
Well, if she's got the information, and it sounds like she does, and we know the Steele dossier was completely phony, completely erroneous, made up,
right,
for the purpose of discrediting and undermining the newly elected president. So I don't know where he would be going saying she lied if there was some involvement on Russia, which is not that much of a surprise. If they did some social media, they try to drive issues like climate change and things of that nature, and even some minor attacks. But there was no heavy effort that was. You know what? It's not even whether or not they had an effort. Did the president collude with them?
Yeah.
That was the accusation.
And that's what they hammered home for 2 years, and
Right.
that's what they tried to prove. So the pushback is substantial, but I would love to see the trains meet. Instead of Democrats say this, Republicans say this, I would just love to, people just want to see the whistleblowers, whoever you got, come forward and show beyond a shadow of a doubt what happened. Because we also heard the same thing about the laptop. Very similar.
Very similar.
Yep.
And the laptop certainly proved to be true. And most of the positions we take proved to be true. And Tulsi sounded pretty intense as she was delivering this information.
Congressman Dan Meuser, great to see you. And
too,
we'll hopefully
Brian.
get you out of Pennsylvania more often into New York.
Doesn't get any better than you, Brian. Thank you very much.